had Men's Health Week this week, and it's actually really important, I think, that guys like us be able to speak openly about the various challenges that guys like us are going through. How have you found this week?
A week like any other. My week's pretty chock a block between casework, like drug and alcohol casework, and running classes. It's sort of end to end. But this week, just like any other week.
You and I have known each other a couple of weeks now. We first met at the Walker Mile Inertia's domestic violence rally in Tamworth. First, how were the stilettos that you picked?
Well, they didn't actually make it all the way to the end of the walk before they started failing on the heel. So they were either not built for men like me, or I just probably shouldn't have been wearing them in the first place. But no, aside from some grumbling feet, it was all right. It was a good experience.
Yeah, because you work in the PCYC, and I first think it's really good that it's really starting to become more and more popular again because it used to be quite the big thing way back when. Then it kind of declined, saying, "Oh, who wants to go to the PCYC or whatever the hell's going to be offered there?" Then it started to come back, and when I see like all the gymnastic classes, the daycare, and all that, it's really good to see institutions like the PCYC being utilised here. I mean, at least that also means you've got a job too.
Indeed. One of my favourite things about that is passing on the skills and doing what I love, and indeed um, getting paid to do what I love. So that's fantastic. But end of the day, PCYC I think has been an institution in the state and the nation for youth and for as a community hub. So yeah, like you say, it's really nice to see that ongoing, and I think we're able. Like I've just noticed that I've been able to operate within the PCYC under my own steam, and then run the classes my own way, which is just fantastic.
And one of the great things, of course, is we are starting to see in our boxing classes, we've got some young teenagers, some older guys. So our classes are quite varied as well, and that's really important to get that whole diverse range of people. We also have got a few girls who've also joined in for that physical exercise as well. And the classes that you've created have really been really welcoming. It's not that often that we get to think of a welcoming environment when we're trying to smash someone's face in, really.
Indeed, I released the paradox of boxing on one hand, but also the friendly environment on another. And I think boxing, as much as it is an individual sport, it's very much a team sport. Your team is the people that you're in the gym with, training, sparring, sweating, bleeding, you name it. So it really brings you closer together as friends and teammates. So trying to create a gym space and a class environment where people can walk in straight off the street and feel welcomed, because that makes all the benefits of boxing accessible to your average punter. All right, and I think that's the key.
How did you get involved in the whole PCYC and the mental health sector? Because it's not every day that you're thinking, yeah, I'll jump right into this, and it's a tough environment to be in just for yourself because you would be seeing and dealing with things that could pop out of nowhere, and lives can depend upon it.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question directly, how did I get into boxing and the mental health? I guess it's really just a byproduct of my journey. I started boxing when I was 16 because I was looking for an outlet. I just kept growing throughout my 20s, in a lot of different directions, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And then I arrived at a turning point in my life where I departed the corporate space and was left questioning what I was to do there. And then, well, it landed for me that it was to create a livelihood out of my passions, which was at that point, sharing these practices, tools, and the insights and frameworks that I'd sort of uncovered for myself, and sharing them for others' benefit.
That's really impressive. And I like how you said that you know, everyone has their own life journey and everyone is unique. And it's also interesting how people's lives then intersect with everyone's interests or desires and all that. Like you invited me for boxing, and I've taken it back up, and I'm absolutely loving it. I actually love getting my face smashed in. That's I think something that really that's I think something that's really important. Being able to you know to deal with that, and I remember last week, you got like you always got me clean on the nose bridge, and you just saw me just grin. Like, that's like, yeah, bring it on.
Oh man, yeah, it's addictive. What can I say? You know, and it's not the fact that you're getting hit. It's the adrenaline rush that comes from having to test yourself in that fashion, physically, mentally. You know, it's like there's no hiding in the ring, and who you are is on display for anybody watching.
I absolutely love that. And what I find is when I'm in the ring, my thoughts really narrow down. Like I actually get very focused instead of like all guns blazing in my head. I find when I'm facing off with you, I think, okay, where do I make my next step? Where do I feel like where am I going to jab? When's he going to start moving around? Okay, he's about to move his left hook, like me pull that around to the side. That's something I have noticed. Like, you know,
Mm.
there's no concept of time or anything. It's just I'm I'm there in the I'm there in the moment.
Yeah, it's pure flow state, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and I will say it's like when you're in that environment, there's no real room for thought outside of what you're there to do, what's right in front of you. You can't be thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. It's right here and now, and what's coming at you next.
I really agree about that. And I think it's also important because this also works in life outside of boxing as well. It helps not just the physical exercise, the cardio. Everyone keeps talking about how great like the cardio aspect is. I'm just happy to be doing something that allows me to punch something and I feel good about doing it. So I think that certainly helps. But the mental aspect too is that mental discipline. You know, like also listening to your body, looking at what your opponent is doing, being able to also figure out like being in this mindset that can also help outside of boxing as well in the workplace or social areas, or even if you're in a some guy wants to try and pick a fight with you at at the pub.
What you
Or,
did.
if that's that that's that happens. This also allows us to be able to be in that mindset in other places outside of the ring. So
Indeed. I view boxing as a vehicle for delivering to these kind of life attitudes, these sort of things like don't judge a book by its cover. Like you can learn something from anyone. Like these things that go so deeply in the ring and in the gym because they have to, because you're getting this real world experience of them. So like I said, it's the little guy that can, beat you seven ways from Sunday. And you really can learn something from even just the guy that's come straight in off the street. So just as a sport, and it's so much more than just throwing fists. It's really a deeply mental game. That's what they compare it to chess.
yeah, I have heard that because it's not about brawling. This is the one thing. It's because often people think, this is just guys and to a degree girls just smashing each other in a ring. In fact, trying to create a spectacle, but it is something much more. For a lot of it, it's that personal development. You see all the Rocky movies and all the journeys like Muhammad Ali, who has come from the bottom and worked their way up to the pinnacle of their own self-accomplishment. I think that's one of the biggest problems. It's not about a bloodlust, because if it was a bloodlust, I think you might want to see a shrink or something about that, or go in the defense force, or something like that. It's so much more. Boxing is, because this is something that is, in many ways, is such a personal sport, and it's confined in such a small area where you have potentially millions of people watching, not just in the stands, but in TV, or listening to it on the radio, or watching it online. It's like this whole focal point about two people in a ring, and one will be the winner and one will be the loser. Unless, of course, the ref says, "Nah, it's a tie." Then everyone's very unhappy, regardless.
Yes, indeed. Well, my old boxing coach used to say it's the last gladiator sport. It's, the boxing it's quite pure in that it's really only fists. There's none of this MMA sort of ground game, grappling, wrestling, kicking, even elbows. So you're quite limited to just your hands, and in that it opens up that ability to be a lot more technical and and you have to be quite a strategist. So he also said you don't want to be a dumb boxer. You don't want to be the person on the end of every punch just because you can. You want to be able to hit and not get hit. So in that, it really is. It's a thinking man's sport, I believe. How?
And it's funny how particularly recently, people have compared, or tried to compare, boxing to that, like the WWE wrestling stuff, all that spectacle. I mean, almost all of that stuff with the WWE and TNA is so faked, and yet people try and compare that with boxing, which you see some of them like fierce rival, like genuine rivalries, where all that emotion and energy is built up and up, because we've got all the way, like the weigh-ins, and some of them have the pre-game TV match, face-offs and all that kind of stuff, and then it actually boils down to the ring itself. And yet we have these people who also have the WWE stuff, which is it's even more of a it's like almost a fantasy in many ways, because everyone's got like their storylines in the WWE, and you're just thinking, you compare that to what actually is happening in boxing, where there are fierce, passionate rivalries, and there's some serious action that happens in the ring and outside. I find sometimes when people try to compare those two sports, I mean, use like the WWE sports in very loose terms, kind of frustrating, because it really, I think, undermines the importance that boxing has to so many people as a sport. And yet you've got people like the Rock coming in, or all the other various WWE people who create that spectacle, but at the same time we know that this is probably not all 100% real.
Yeah, indeed. No, I've always sort of seen it as a bit of a farcical sort of beast, and I think that's the point. It's the drama of it that people love, and that's what they're coming to see, right? So, yeah, but boxing and any sort of full contact martial art it's really no comparison. Although I will say some of those wrestlers can do some pretty unbelievable stuff. So they are certainly athletes. So don't want to rubbish them on that front. But yeah, I mean, it's like whatever floats your boat, really.
I guess that's something that happens. What I also want to get actually your opinion on is, at the moment, like particularly over the past couple of years, we had all these people challenge each other to boxing matches if they over a disagreement or something. There was like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk infamously say like, "Oh, let's have a boxing match," and that has never happened at all. Then we have all these YouTubers starting to do it. Do you think that in some ways also is demeaning to boxing itself, or do you think that is at least some way where you can possibly get to more audiences, more people who might be interested in participating? Because it once again it does go into a little bit into that spectacle, although it's not to that massive degree that like the WWE have done.
I'll say that it's been good for the sport because it's brought attention to it. And sure, maybe it's a popularity contest, but at the end of the day, they're still stepping through the ropes. We saw that Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight, and I think it was a foregone conclusion from the start how it was going to pan out. But the rah rah and obviously the money that changed hands, it served a purpose for them, I'm sure, and I think it did serve a purpose for the sport. Although I'm wary of it perhaps being a bit of a negative influence and sort of putting it out there as something that is more akin to that WWE, because that was honestly that particular match was farcical in its nature, because you've got a 60-year-old against a 20 odd year old man in the prime of his life. It was silly that it even got sanctioned.
Well, most of his opponents, with the Paul brothers, when they're like both Paul brothers, when they get involved in this, their opponents have been in their mid to late 30s or even older. And someone's actually been posting on Facebook. It's a post that started to go viral, showing all of Jake Paul's opponents and the ages that they are currently at. And just thinking, yeah, mate, how about you go against someone your own age and see how if you'll come out of the ring alive.
Look, there's certainly so for an up and coming professional boxer with a good manager, that manager is going to pick and choose his fights to enable him to progress just to that next step. So that's why you'll get records of something like we'll say Floyd Mayweather's 50-0. So he's got an unblemished record, and that was because he had smart management right the way through. They didn't put him in the ring to fight somebody that was outside of his ability to beat, and credit to them. So anyway, just to make the point that I think there is this sort of there's a smart way to go about jumping in the ring, and that's to not bite off more than you can chew.
Yes, and it's interesting because a lot of this hype that is built up. I remember, like many years ago, when Anthony Mundine was back in boxing, we had the huge Anthony Mundine Danny Green fights that really worked out, and like what we saw in the ring was spectacular. And then a couple of years later, I think it was Mundine against Costa Tzu, and I just remember this massive hype. Like there was even like TV programs of them sitting opposite each other at a table saying, yeah, we're gonna fight, we're really put like, this is gonna be the big thing. Then I watched the fight, and Mundine choked within in a few minutes. And all that disappointment, everything that had just been built up over several months, because I remember that Mundine was absolutely going to be like tearing apart anyone who got in his way, and yet he choked. And I think that was quite fascinating, because you're thinking, this is a guy who's really built himself up in boxing, and he has a few choice words to say constantly, but when he got into the ring, he couldn't match up to his vibrato. I find that a very interesting aspect of what that masculine push for I'm Anthony Mundine, I'm going to be tearing limb from limb in there, and yet within a few minutes done. And you see thinking, mate, you might need to reevaluate somewhere.
Hey, look, his mouth is writing checks that his ass couldn't catch. And that's the fight game. Like you're gonna talk a big game, and I mean that's good. It serves a purpose. It creates demand, and as a professional fighter, that's the whole idea. It's like it's your job is to put bums in seats.
And you have to also build yourself up.
Absolutely.
You have to see, even if you're in a ridiculous situation, you say, you're like, I've got to really like absolutely like build myself up, saying I'm going to tear into anyone who gets in my way. Like the world will crown me king, or like king, after I've done all this. That's that huge, like a huge push, like that they also have to do mentally to like really bring it up. But the fact is that they have to bring the goods in the whole ring. They have to like put on the absolute mammoth effort. Otherwise, people are going to just thinking, like, mate, we pay good money for this, seriously. Or like if the ref to like calls off the whole thing because he's like a controversial ref's choice, or like it's always like it can come down to just a single moment, and like where it could be literally do or die, and people want to see. I mean, that the hero rise up essentially, or whoever they really want to back to.
An underdog.
Well, that's one of the big things. That's also is we do love the underdog.
Absolutely.
That's one of the thing. That's one of the that's one of the big things, and we've seen quite a lot of those matches. And what I also find fascinating, of course, is especially if they're just coming into boxing, all this pressure, all this attention that is being focused on guys who are maybe 17, 18, 19, that that mental pressure as well that they have to go in, because you have gone through it, and the guys that we've been training with are also going through it. You've been coaching some 14, 15-year-olds as well, and there's that pressure, and that's making sure that they're all like they're mentally sound, not just physically, but they're okay with going with what can be a very high pressure thing on the form of the boxing match.
Well, getting back to the benefits of the sport, and I think, like I said, boxing is a vehicle for a whole lot of things, and a lot of them come down to mental strength, that internal resilience. Being able to push yourself to actually step through the ropes is a mammoth effort. So stepping into the ring, you realise very quickly that the people baying for blood in the fucking nosebleed section, all right, by and large, none of them would have the guts to do what you're doing. But they'll sit out there in the crowd and give you curry for not doing a good job, or not doing it right, or not doing it as they think you should be doing it. And, put them on the hot seat, and they wouldn't even have the guts to step through the ropes.
Oh, yeah. That's one thing that's one thing I noticed. It's interesting when push comes to shove, how many people will skulk away. And it's interesting because you have the stadium, the ring, all these people close proximity to you, cheering or jeering or booing, all that happening while you have to be looking at an opponent right opposite you who could probably clock you if in a heartbeat's notice, and if you're not prepared for that.
100%. And that's the beauty of boxing. That's why I've always loved it, is that it's an individual sport in that win, lose or draw, it's on you. You don't have a team to fall back on.
No.
And yeah, I mean, some of the most profound moments in boxing have been some of the times where you'd rather be anywhere else, but you push yourself through and you do what you need to do. Because as I mentioned, it is a gladiator sport. So it's you and your opponent, and you're here, you're there to do to him what he's there to do to you. Then let the best man win. If you've done the training, if you've had the right coach, if you've done the road work at all hours of the morning, then you set yourself up for success, but it's still not guaranteed. You don't know how your style's going to mesh with his, whether he's got a card up his sleeve, in terms of what he's been doing for training and whatnot. But yeah, so it's an awesome sport in so many different ways.
And it has taken off a lot here in Tamworth. We also have to know, of course, that one wrong hit, can cause a concussion, or even worse. We tragically had that death of that boxer here in Tamworth last year, which is devastating that we're still having this. But of course, that's part of going with the territory. It is that risk factor, and you could have every type of medical preparations. You could have everyone on standby. The rest could be looking at the game absolutely closely, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. Someone might have an aneurysm, like that just happened that no one knew about. You could have, someone have one slight slip and, crack their ankle. That is something I guess many people saying, oh, why do we box? Why do we allow these kind of sports to happen? And especially if, the guy who sadly died was very young. He was from Tuvalu, of course, and there was a lot of, it's a tragedy that he lost his life. And we were there watching him in the ring, and he went down and then was taken to the hospital and all that, and then finding out that he died later. That is something that's difficult, especially if, when we go in the ring, we're in this almost in the same field, and you're thinking that could happen to us, but that is also the risk. That is the risk of this contact sport.
There's risks inherent to life, and a life worth living is one that's going to be full of risks. Because, to be fair, it's like if you're not risking something and not stepping outside of your comfort zone, then you're going to live a pretty small life indeed. So the risk of boxing is very real, and it's not. I was thinking last night, I've done thousands upon thousands of rounds. Now, CTE, that chronic trauma, so over many years, that's a very real fear, and it's a real risk for anybody in the sport. So I think the landscape of boxing is shifting, whereas before it was very much a tough man's game. Now it's more of a strategic,
smart man's game.
Yeah, it's definitely, even the pros are doing it in a lot more of a sustainable way. They're doing light rounds, very technical, very quick, and very sharp. So I think we are starting to wake up to the realities of what just taking endless amounts of punishment over a long period can do to us. But it's no different than any of the football codes.
Yeah. I mean, I've had several concussions on the footy field.
Yeah.
So, and, I'm slightly unscathed from what happens. I remember getting, I got a couple of years ago whacked in the ice socket when I was playing in Canberra. I had double vision, and I actually got possession of the ball. I continued playing. My teammates said that when they saw me get whacked, and they said, you turned on the guy who did it to you, and we thought you were going to kill him. Because I just remember the double vision, and apparently I leered over him. I got possession of the ball and continued playing for several minutes, and then got off the field and had a massive black and blue welt under there. So I probably should have stopped playing straight afterwards. Although, part of that was the adrenaline just still going. Of course, you've got to sometimes you have to know when you have to stop and throw in the towel, or just be saying, okay, I can't go any further. That's, I think, but in some ways, I guess, because you don't want to feel like you're chickening out or anything too. That's an issue, I think, for guys like us. Also, we don't want to feel like we're we're a wuss or anything like that. That's something that we still have to talk about, and saying it's okay to tap out. I mean, that's what I had to do in jiu-jitsu. Tapping out is fine.
Yeah, that's what it's an interesting point you raise around the sort of the connotation of what it means to be the bravado, right? I just want to say the bravado that drives us and compels us towards these acts of, we'll call it self-sacrifice, where you're pitting your very well-being against the forces of fate.
Yeah, you're putting
Is
your existence.
indeed.
You're putting your literal existence, your livelihood, your entire life, not just into the hands of your opponent, but yourself as well, because you are the one who you have to stand your ground. You have to make sure that you are doing everything that you've been trained to, because one wrong move could absolutely screw you up.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really important. It's on so many factors around here, and it's done in this intricate dance, really. And if there's one thing one thing that gets out of line, or you hesitate for 1 second or anything, bam, and who knows what could happen.
Yeah. And getting back to the starting point of risk, it's like we risk it every time we get in the car. Life implies risk, and sports also risk. Some sports more so than others. So managing that risk is certainly something to be mindful of, but just being smart about it. At the end of the day, acknowledging your own limitations, accepting where you may be assuming out of your depth, and just pulling yourself back a little. I think ego, again, that ego and bravado can drive us to do things that perhaps we're not quite ready for. I can certainly speak for experience on that.
Yeah, so can I. I'm often like some could call it bravado, or others resistance, others stubbornness. Pure. So, and I can say I'm a very, very stubborn man. That's for sure. I am very, very stubborn.
I think the other aspect to all of this, and the reason why we do what we do, is that stereotypical notion that for a man to be a man, he must be strong, tough, be able to fight.
Yeah,
my perspective anyway.
Protect your protect your woman, protect your family. That's man up, all that kind of stuff, and don't show emotion, or stiff upper lip.
Exactly.
And we know how disastrous that actually has been now.
It's fucking damaging to the psyche.
We've had like murder suicides because of this. We know depression, of course, out here in regional areas, depression, mental health issues. Guys can feel so isolated because they're afraid to speak up, because they're thinking, oh, you're just being a sissy boy, and that makes it worse.
Men are the worst. Men will hold men to the idea of what it is to be a man to their own detriment. And it's like we judge other men based on this stereotype, based on their conforming to some stereotype that we have in mind. So it's an ideal that for all and that it's made up of all the things that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
The silent stoic, the tough, emotionless sort of hard worker, and this is the stereotype that's breaking people and ending lives, because a man that can't measure up to that feels not a man, and it's other men that make him feel that way.
Yeah, and sometimes we're not comfortable speaking about these things, but then we might be sitting next to a guy who's thinking the exact same thought. It is that question of trying to smash that glass wall between us. And I know you run the men's wellness groups around here, and we've got one that coming up this month, and that's been a really important aspect for guys gathering up. How are those groups been?
Mate, it's been tough going. Like, it's been. I'll start from the start. I lost a very dear friend of mine in 2019 to suicide, and that put me on notice of the gravity of the situation and what we were being faced with, and the fact that people were taking their lives based on taking their lives for whatever reason they had. But yeah, like I said, just put me on notice. And then I came back to Tamworth in 2020 and founded the Men's Circle. And through just trial and refinement over the years, it's sort of arrived at where it is today. So now it's quite it's a healthy conversation. It's not like it's not the sort of conversation that you'd expect at the pub. It's stuff worth talking about. So I've had to, I guess, why I say it's been hard going is that I've had to almost like create the demand for the service I knew was needed in a place like Tamworth, which is really a conscious desert. So, and just in the sense that there's a lot of men doing exactly what they've always done, going to the pub and talking about not much at all, right? Drinking piss and talking about the week that was.
Or she'll be, or the she'll be right kind of thing. She'll be right.
Just shallow conversations. And I think what was needed, and I'm seeing the truth of this, was something a little bit deeper, a growth conversation, something where you've had those conversations where you'll talk with someone and you walk away to go, I'm fundamentally shifted from that interaction. Like something has changed. A light bulb has switched on, an insight's opened up a new world of possibilities for you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
These are the conversations that we can be having.
And the fact is, people have been saying, we need to have these conversations and it's on offer. So the main thing, of course, is getting that awareness and attention and getting guys to, participate and being able to do so at, times that they can do so. But it's also just showing that, yes, there is help there is assistance, and you can speak openly with fellow mates. It could be, who knows could turn up to some of these sessions. That's one of the few things. And if you see someone from work who's going through the same thing, turning up at one of your circle events, that could be absolutely tremendous. And, and that could create so many positive outcomes as well.
Yeah, it lights me up to see somebody taking on board something that they've been exposed to, whether through one of my initiatives or conversation, a sideline, whatever it is, taking that on board and running with it. It really brings me a lot of joy to see somebody stepping out of the plate to be a force for change in their own world. And at the end of the day, we are the ones that are responsible for creating the lives that we want. Okay. So taking responsibility and accepting direction, becoming humble and acknowledging you don't know it all is a necessary first step. Because then all of a sudden it opens you up to stepping into a space like Men's Circle where it may be uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, perhaps you can walk out of there a little different to how you walked in. And that's the point.
And finally, mate, what's your message to maybe some of the younger guys who's out there who's maybe struggling a bit or who's looking possibly at doing something like boxing, or has been told, you're nothing but a twig of a person or a wuss, or someone who's never done boxing or is maybe afraid, like, I don't want to get hurt. What's your message to them?
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. All right, growth is a process where you go through this cycle of discomfort, becomes comfortable, then you look for the next discomfort. As a drug and alcohol caseworker, one of my jobs is to help people become comfortable with being uncomfortable without resorting to reactive patterns. So let's face it, life implies pain and growth implies discomfort. So buckle up and, expose yourself deliberately to these little discomforts. Step into a new space, have a conversation you're dreading, and it will become more comfortable. I guarantee it. So growth is one of those things that if you can truly make your life if you can orient yourself towards growth throughout your life, you can't possibly comprehend where you'll get to, because you'll just continue to look for the next little step along the way. You'll be constantly striving for betterment, and your full potential is waiting for you. And that's the beautiful thing about reaching your potential, is that it never happens. If you're committed to growth and you show up to be 1% better every day, you can't possibly know where you end up. I think that's the beauty of the uncertainty of it.
And of course, I'm training with you. You're my coach. I'm aiming to get fitness competition fit wise in about a year's time. So, first, just on your own personal personal analysis, how do you think I'm doing so far?
Hey, good. Like I said, you're showing up.
Yeah,
That is half the struggle, and as I mentioned, it's necessary piece, but and the rest is time. So you show up, you've got the heart for it, you've got the intention, the commitment is there, no doubt, and the rest of it, it's just a passage of time. There are no shortcuts.
no.
Right?
No, I think that's one of the most important things, because it's the same with, I've had young guys come up to me at the gym like past couple of years, and other people have come up to others of, talking about, getting on steroids when they're 13, 14, because they instantly want to get as huge as possible. And just basically we just have to remind them, guys, if you're going to take steroids, that down there will shrink up to nothingness, and you will not be happy. And you'll might have permanent acne. Would you be really happy looking more pockmarked than the moon into your 60s?
So
That's a major thing.
A lot of downsides. All right, but I think it's the nature of the world we live in, where we are looking for the shortcuts.
We are. It's always the easiest way, like minimal effort, all that kind of, all that kind of stuff. And I get it. Especially, some people write up essays using ChatGPT now, because it's just, too hard to do all that. But now you get caught out completely. We've had novelists actually getting caught out because they leave AI notes in their books. Whoops, yes. And then, that's how that causes all the backlash from that. So, it's that journey. I guess the main thing is like what we said at the start, that journey. That's, starting off.
And that's consistency beats intensity.
Yeah.
You can go on this 6 week to fit and big, or you can view it as a 6-year journey. And that's the realistic sort of nature of it, is that when you set out to become fit and well, it's a mission of a lifetime, and it will take years before you see the fruits of your labor. So when you look at it as a short-term thing, you set yourself up for a rebound, and you set yourself up to perhaps go hard, very intense throughout, 6 weeks, and fall short. So set yourself up to just show up, like I said, 1% better tomorrow, and do that every day for the rest of your life.
And the fact is that some days you're going to have like a down day and an up day, and that's what it is. That's the growth. That's what you've got to, that's what everyone goes through. And just because you've had maybe a less than stellar session doesn't mean, give up. You plateaued and you're going all the way down now. That's, you peaked. I think that's one thing that's really important.
Yeah, we call it all or nothing thinking. I've missed one, therefore I'm a failure. I'll give up.
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to make another point around sort of fragility. So I would say boxing as a sport and training in the sport, it creates resilience. Another way to say resilience is anti-fragile. I see a lot of very fragile people in my line of work that have resorted to behaviors that have led them down the road of addiction. So really trying to deliberately expose ourselves to discomfort is a way of becoming anti-fragile, right? And building that resilience that enables us to handle the chaos of life with calmness and serenity. All right, and it's not an overnight thing, but it's certainly something worth striving for.
Dale, as always, thanks so much. Welcome back to On the Record. And of course, we'll catch up. And by the way, this is non-alcoholic. We should be
free.
Yes, we should. We'll.
And it's heaps normal.
Yes, and they're really good, actually. No, not sponsored, by the way. Not sponsored. Cheers. See you guys. Bye.